And don't forget GregPalast.com to get his excellent book for folks that understand how all this criminality works, Vulture's Picnic. Now, let me hit a few headlines. We're going back to Greg Palast. This is big, and I knew it was going to upset the system because they hate the troops. The foreign banks that have hijacked us use the troops, use their heroism, use their honor in these wicked wars that they're sent into because they believe they're defending America. The fact that Ron Paul gets 71 to 75, depending on which month you look at it, the latest numbers are about 72% of all military donations for all Republican candidates and Obama combined. That's on record. Federal Elections Commission. The fact that that's there really freaks out the system. And Adam Kokesh had the idea, and it looks like thousands are going to show up to have active duty and veterans march to the White House. And they said they're going to be peaceful and turn their back, though, on the commander-in-chief, who's a traitor-in-chief and a globalist puppet, that Benedict Arnold. And this is to break the hoax that Ron Paul doesn't have support. In fact, if you show people the article that just went up at Infowars.com, it's got Ron Paul when he was in the Air Force. Leaked email. Military top brass warned troops off march for Ron Paul. Again, leaked email. Military top brass warned troops off march for Ron Paul. That's a good headline, but that's a British writer we've got, and people may not get that classic English. Military top brass tell troops not to march with Ron Paul. We need to change that headline. People aren't going to get kind of old English. Leaked email. Military top brass tell troops not to march with Ron Paul, or not to march for Ron Paul. High importance message distributed by senior naval security. You get me Nemo in here right now. Just go ahead and call him in here now. I'm going to get this headline changed. I'm kind of the editor-in-chief around here and unofficial editor. I don't give myself like a title like CEO of Infowars.com or Galactic Commander. I don't actually have a title here. I'm director of my operation, though. And most places, you know, editors go through 3 or 4 levels. Hey, Kurt, come on in. This is great what Steve did. I want to send this to Drudge, but people aren't going to get kind of that old English. Leaked email, military top brass warn troops off march for Ron Paul. Americans aren't going to get that on average. So just say, unless they, you know, got an English degree. Military top brass, you know, tell troops not to march with Ron Paul, or not to march for Ron Paul. Don't you agree? As Infowars editor, let's change that on both sides. Great job, Steve Watson, part of our total transparency program here. Okay, going back to Greg Palast. Greg, what do you make of the media demonization of Ron Paul? What do you make of this headlong march towards war? Why does the system want that? What are you hearing from your inside sources?
Well, it's not so much that it's anti-Paul, that it is pro-billionaire. You've got billionaires behind Santorum, behind Gingrich, many billionaires, a true billionaires club called Restore Our Future behind Romney, and of course behind Obama. So basically it's the pro-billionaire. You get your choice. I mean, unlike Greece, where they told you the banker that would be made your president and in the prime minister of Italy, here we get to choose our billionaires' choices. And so that's what's going on. The billionaires have put their boys forward. And in fact, in Vulture's Picnic, one of the things I talk about is, who are these guys? You notice that they keep talking about the avalanche of money for Mitt Romney. Well, where is that avalanche coming from? Paul Singer, Paul the Vulture Singer, and I didn't give him the name Vulture, but that's what he's known. Paul the Vulture Singer wrote a check for $1 million. That was just the beginning for Romney. We have Bill Koch, $500,000 check. That was the beginning of the money. We have Paulson, who earned $4 billion, not only betting, but pushing the U.S. mortgage market over a cliff, and he made $4 billion when the U.S. housing market collapsed, and he made sure it did. He made sure it did. Made $4 billion a year, so he's tithed his $1 million to Romney. I'm not picking on Romney in particular, just that seems to be where the billionaires right now are coalescing, but they're on all the candidates, including Obama. Obama has his, believe me.
Yeah, I mean, all this fake left-right fighting between, you know, Al Gore's people and all the rest of it, and Republicans. You guys should all be at parties together. I mean, the very same foreign mega banks run both parties, so you should, I mean, this fight is all just show.
To be, you know, let me ask you a question, Alex. Who the hell is Barack Obama? Where did he come from outer space? Was he just the most stellar state senator you've ever heard of, that he suddenly goes from state senate in 2 years to the Oval Office? The answer is that he rode a billionaire named Penny Pritzker, who pulled him out of the Illinois Senate and blessed him as the future, as their Democratic choice. Remember, there's a Republican choice and Democratic choice. Pritzker had been removed and personally fined $400 million for manipulating a bank on the south side of Chicago. So what they have to do is now. You and I, if we had to pay $400 million, that would be kind of harmful to our bank accounts, I think, Alex. I think it might take a chunk out of you. Not for Penny. She's worth, according to Forbes, $2.7 billion. So she decided she didn't like paying $400 million fines, so she decided to get someone who would change the rules so she wouldn't pay those fines. Same with the Kochs. They're facing criminal charges.
Let me ask you this question. Why is there, or do you agree with this statement, a giant exodus of the billionaires to armored retreats around the world? Why are they fleeing and hanging off helicopter skids like the fall of Saigon?
Well, like I said, in Argentina and in Ecuador, people went into the streets, and they're angry, and a lot of them were armed. I'm not a big fan of arms and bombs, but there's a lot of anger out there, and there's been uprisings throughout the world that have been quite successful. And so I think these, it would be prudent if you had $1 billion, you'd want an escape route yourself. But I think their escape route at the moment is the 2012 election. If their escape route is into the White House, so to speak.
And it's not that Obama is not their guy, but if they put somebody new in, it'll take folks a while to figure out that this is another teleprompter reading puppet, and so they'll take some time for the paint, the new paint to wear off.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of, for example, what do these guys want? For example, in the case of Romney, what does a guy like Paulson want? He's betting against the U.S. economy. So the last thing he wants, he would go broke. He's been shorting the U.S. economy. So he would be going broke if the economy recovered. Do we really want someone betting against the economy being the guy behind the President of the United States? In the case of Paul
exactly. I mean, all these people that ran the government policies are making money and knew to bet against us. I mean, they're just absolute traitors.
And I want to make it clear, when I say they bet, it sounds like they're guessing which way the economy is going, just riding on it. It's not like it's a fixed roulette wheel. When Paulson was facing, even under Bush, was talking about restoring the mortgage market, and Obama also talking about having a foreclosure moratorium, Paulson went berserk and contacted his friends at Goldman Sachs, which is his investment bank. And what Paulson did was he basically threatened these guys and said, you will not. I've got a lot of money riding here, and how dare you try to undo the fall of the housing market. So when Romney says things like, oh, we should let it bottom out, remember, this is not a policy. He's just speaking for the guy who's betting on the bottom, on it bottoming out and falling through the bottom. I mean, understand, Romney's backer made $4 billion in a single year betting against the housing market. That's really important, because we're not talking about policy here. We're talking about billionaires setting the direction of the economy in the nation, in both parties, with all the major candidates.
Well, look at Obama giving billions and billions to fake energy companies that never even made anything or tried to. They would just rent an office building and literally no one's in it, and they just keep the money. I mean, you give Obama $500,000 in one case, and you get $500 million. I mean, that is a good vending machine. I mean, that's like sticking a quarter in and getting $1,000 back.
And you have to look, when we say that these companies get it, it's the banks that guarantee them. For example, snuck into the emergency defense bill that we had for Iraq last year, and I have this little thing in Vulture's Picnic. When we had the defense bill, which was to provide vests, the new Kevlar vests and special protection for the troop transport vehicles, what's replaced the Humvees now, no one voted against it. I think maybe Ron Paul did, but I mean, almost no one voted against that emergency appropriation for the war in Iraq. Snuck into that bill was an $8 billion loan guarantee for 4 nuclear plants. Now, exactly when did our boys and women in Iraq and Afghanistan suddenly need for their emergency protection 4 nuclear plants? Now, this is not about whether nuclear power is good or bad. It's about a deception. We're told that we have to protect people from taking bullets and Humvees being blown up by IEDs. And what it really is a cover for a massive payment, not only to the nuclear industry, you have to understand, because we're not going to even build those nuclear plants. That ain't going to happen. It was J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman and Citibank were all the guys lending this money with a government guarantee, charging a massive interest, and we have to pay for it. We have to pay for it. That's what's going on.
Let me briefly ask you this, then we got to go to calls in this segment. The next two short ones ahead of Bob Chapman joining us. You talk about how it's a rigged bet, and that's why Bob and others said that they think Corzine was ordered to make that bet and take the people's private money and give it to J.P. Morgan Chase, who did get the $1.6 billion we've now confirmed. And so that's why he's being protected to lie to Congress and say, I don't know where it went. Because normally they don't make 40-to-1 bets unless they know it's rigged. What's your inside skinny? You're probably the best guy to ask this. Do you know?
Well, all I know is I don't know the latest on MF Global. What I do know is that if you do, in fact, it's now up on your site, or if you go to vulturespicnic.org, and you'll see it in the book too, is that there is a letter from Tim Geithner, who was our Secretary of Treasury, to Larry Summers, who was the economic czar under Obama. This is an older letter. It's highly, highly confidential. I did have it confirmed by the officials this confidential note, which is basically a plan by the U.S. government to conduct a trade war against any government which refused to accept derivatives trading and toxic assets from J.P. Morgan and other major banks. The important thing about this memo is, why would they do this? It said, Geithner is telling Summers, you have to call our guys. And he listed the 5 biggest, most important bankers, including John Corzine, who was then CEO of Goldman Sachs. Remember, before he's governor of New Jersey, he was CEO of Goldman Sachs. They don't move without calling these guys. Now, think about that. They were having all these secret meetings, Goldman, J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America. These guys are having these secret meetings. If Corzine... They can't touch Corzine. He would open up his files. Can you imagine the meetings that these guys have had about manipulating the economy, including manipulating our foreign policy? This was dangerous stuff. We came to near blows and near war with Ecuador and Brazil over this stuff.
That's my next question, and we did show the document for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers. Radio listeners can go to your site and see it right there, vulturespicnic.org. But just briefly here. We're going to break, and I want to do 2 short segments of calls because I want to at least get these 5 or 6 callers that are up front. War, how does that tie into it, and internet censorship? It looks like the establishment is openly moving with authoritarianism now. They're not even having any pretense of freedom anymore. Why have things changed? Well,
I think that right now, and war has always been a weapon. It was, I guess, Thomas Friedman, who is the globalization apologist, said that the invisible hand of the marketplace needs a very strong fist inside that glove. And that's what's going on here. Obviously, they have to threaten. There has to be some type of military threat. When Ecuador threw out Occidental Petroleum, which is Al Gore's company, remember, we had to have some type of military threat behind that. And we now see, in the case, I was just in Bosnia, for example, where, obviously NATO troops were, and basically the whole place has been looted by, under the so-called guise of reforming their economy. So war has some very profitable uses, and no one's gone back to Bosnia and said, whatever happened to that country? The answer is, if it wasn't nailed down, and even if it was, it's been stolen. And that was under the agreements that were set by our U.S. State Department, that they basically had to sell off everything in that country. Everything.
Now, the globalists are vampiric locust. We're going to be right back, do 2 short segments of calls. I promise we're going right to your calls out of the break. Mike, Richard, Alex, John, Robert, and others. Then Bob Chapman is going to be joining us. We'll have open phones for Bob as well on the economy, and a blitzkrieg of news I've got to get to. And don't forget GregPalast.com to get his excellent book. For folks that understand how all this criminality works, Vulture's Picnic. Now, let me hit a few headlines. We're going back to Greg Palast. This is big, and I knew it was going to upset the system because they hate the troops. The foreign banks that have hijacked us use the troops, use their heroism, use their honor in these wicked wars that they're sent into because they believe they're defending America. The fact that Ron Paul gets 71 to 75, depending on which month you look at it, the latest numbers are about 72% of all military donations for all Republican candidates and Obama combined. That's on record. Federal Elections Commission. The fact that that's there really freaks out the system. And Adam Kokesh had the idea, and it looks like thousands are going to show up to have active duty and veterans march to the White House. And they said they're going to be peaceful and turn their back, though, on the command unofficial editor. I don't give myself like a title like CEO of Infowars.com or Galactic Commander. I don't actually have a title here. I'm director of my operation, though. And most places, you know, editors go through 3 or 4 levels. Hey, Kurt, come on in. This is great what Steve did. I want to send this to Drudge, but people aren't going to get kind of that old English. Leaked email, military top brass warn troops off march for Ron Paul. Americans aren't going to get that on average. So just say, unless they, you know, got an English degree. That's a British writer we've got, and people may not get that classic English. Military top brass tell troops not to march with Ron Paul. We need to change that headline. People aren't going to get kind of old English. Leaked email, military top brass tell troops not to march with Ron Paul, or not to march for Ron Paul. High importance message distributed by senior naval security. You get me Nemo in here right now. Just go ahead and call him in here now. I'm going to get this headline changed. I'm kind of the editor-in-chief around here, and editor-in-chief who's a traitor-in-chief and a globalist puppet, the Benedict Arnold. And this is to break the hoax that Ron Paul doesn't have support. In fact, if you show people the article that just went up at Infowars.com, it's got Ron Paul when he was in the Air Force. Leaked email. Military top brass warned troops off march for Ron Paul. Again, leaked email. Military top brass warned troops off march for Ron Paul. That's a good headline, but